outside of turn 3, which is up through the 10th of July, I guess. Size of the turns seems kind of variable. Didn't get a lot of error points, so I'm just launching 2 attacks, high odds. I'm going to just try to blast through in one location. I don't think that's the best thing in general to do, but I'm letting the air availability kind of dictate what's going to happen here. Attacks, I don't remember if this one ended up 5-1 with the shifts. I think so, and this one ended up 4-1. This one did not go well, bad roll. The table is kind of nasty, to tell you the truth. Yeah, it's got good results on one end, but on the other end, bad things can still happen even at high odds. In this case, it was an A1, D1. But over here, I got a D2, R2, and it was all German armor, so it pulled back. Now, something I got to remember, there's little rules in this that are a little tricky. Mr. Bickford, I believe, pointed out to me, these are things that always trap him on the SCS. And yeah, so for example, exploitation movement. If I advance into a position that I'm not in a zone of control, then I can use exploitation movement. Now that's doesn't look like that's going to be particularly easy here. So I'm not going to be able to use exploitation to really break out of here quite the same. I think I cheated the first time I played. Again, in the Allies' favor. I'm doing good things for the Allies, I guess. You know, I've only played a couple of these SCS games, and it's been a long time, and yeah, they're not sticking well with me in my head. So I got to figure out what's going to advance. But if I leave things back here, or I could even advance things back there, then I could set up and move further and possibly do an overrun and try to gain some ground. Of course, moving through zones is expensive, so we'll see. Americans are in positions where they're going to start hitting German units that are not in the bocage. No attacks happening. One nice thing about Paris, remember this, replacement units, when they're built anew, as long as you control Paris and a line going back, you can build them in Paris. That's one reason not to lose Paris beyond the gaming mechanism of trying to hold it. I think at this point you really do want to try to limit things to Normandy, but once they make the breakout out of that bocage area and maybe get a couple of ports, things are beginning to look like, yeah, Paris doesn't look easy to hold. There's probably a couple of turns, because it's only, you know, it's turn 8 that you're limited to not abandoning Paris. There's probably a couple of turns where you want to leave Paris where you can't. I probably erred with the Allies by not dropping a landing last turn. There's more forces beginning to accumulate down here in the south, and I really didn't want to make this landing, but I probably want to make one down here. If I had taken area E, that would have caused, and again, you know, it's not like I haven't made errors for the Germans, but if I had taken area, the entry area E, I think that shifts things up to area A. I don't remember the exact rule, but it definitely displaces them, and that would make for a much easier situation. Now I'm covering this area, although maybe not as well as I should. You know what I should do? I should swap these units, because I'd rather not lose this unit on an attack into here, and honestly, other than the attack, there's not much that can be done. Actually, let's put 2 units down there in area E, just to prevent the Allies from swooping in and taking it while it's easy. Give the Germans a little bit of help. And we move on to the next turn. A little sloppy with my supply lines. Here's how I'm handling it. I'm putting these units out of supply. I left my headquarters back at ports. They didn't have to be there, so I pushed them forward a little bit. But these guys, there's almost no way I would have had them in the supply at the beginning of the turn. And the range is actually that bad. I mean, I'm 2 hexes away. I'm not in supply. because 1, 2, 3, 4 for the zone of control, 5, 6 crossing the stream. The Bocage is one moving point. It's tough. It's real tough. So we're gonna have some struggles because of that, which will be cool. I gotta consider my invasion down in the south. I mean, I've got to do it at some point, and I don't know. The moment has passed, so maybe I want to drop down here at Saint-Tropez and get a build up and try to bash my way through, I guess. Put another port. It's a long way to Marseille. Jeez. This is 6 turns after turn 4, which puts us at 10, which I think is here. Ouch. I'll figure out some forces going in there. They still got to roll to get in there. It's definitely a pain in the butt, is finding your places where you want to drop your replacement points. I mean, obviously, if you've got losses, you can just say, screw it. I don't want to hunt. Right now, I've got 2 U.S. replacement points. And I don't think I have any U.S. casualties. I already took one of the replacements back, and I didn't take any hits since then. The Commonwealth has damage. All the more reason to keep throwing the U.S. into the battle. Might be a good reason to... Yeah, these are all U.S. and Free French, so that's cool. The Germans having kind of an open line. They were here. Yeah, they're okay here. So here's the thing. The 180 rule is in effect, but that just stops them from being able to trace, I believe. I'm trying to see if they have to pull back from there. I would cheat them. And yeah, I know I'm making mistakes left and right here, but that's my life, isn't it? Let's look for that thing. Oh, that's 2 turns in a row. Where's the... German units do not negate enemy zones of control. Yeah, okay. So you can't be kind of lodged in the enemy line and trace through other German units. But I'm fine here. I can trace back here. So the Brits, if they pushed into this hex, would throw me out of supply. But then they'd not be able to trace supply either because of how tight things are for them. I gotta be careful that I'm in supply here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 doesn't work. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, my move into there is gonna be a problem. So I'm gonna have to get another supply item, truck or a headquarters or something in. This turn I'm fine. I was in supply at the beginning of the turn with that unit, just not with this unit. And you can see we pushed further forward. But supply is definitely hard to come by here and much, much finickier than I expected it to be. All right, well, I'll continue with these attacks. And we made our landing just fine, lost 1 Free French. We'll be getting more shipping in there. Of course, we'll be trapped up against here because the Germans are going to come flooding over. We could land we could do another landing down there though, if need be. So maybe there's a quick way of cheating our way into Marseille and having a stream of initial troops to help take it. I don't know. Shipping brought these guys in up here, continuing to bring 2 Americans and 1 Brit in. Although, as we get closer to here, that's beginning to get more and more questionable. But they're stacking issues and they need forces. The Brits have real problems. They have not been able to dislodge this. The Americans got an attack. They got essentially a breakthrough, so they pull their armor back out of the zone of control as part of their advance and then come slamming back in. They did an exploitation overrun, used air support in it. They hit something bigger than they thought they were going to hit, got a 1-to-1, which is what all 3 attacks were, basically. Got a 1-to-1, in the clear, and finally managed to take a significant loss. And now we got this guy here, so that we've got, I hope, some supply. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for now. I'm gonna need a truck real soon, though. To get to Le Havre, I think I'm gonna need a truck. So, yeah. At least one. All right, on to the German side, and this is where things start getting interesting. You can see there's these units with the stripes on top. Those are going to be showing up on the east map, and pretty soon we got bunches and bunches of Ruskies coming. Eastern reinforcements, we get the Hermann Goering over here in Vienna. Great. Area C, we get a pile of units here. However, these have an asterisk on them, as do the Area D ones coming in, not the Berlin guys. We can throw those Volksgrenadiers down without a problem. But for these, we're going to be rolling a die for each unit to see whether or not it survives, basically. So let's start with the big important armor. First one loses a step. SS loses a step. Other one loses a step. And this is coming in from over here. Oh, it's infantry loses a step, and some Hungarians, some of which do not have extra steps to lose. Let's do the big cab first. Loses a step. And then the last two, which are the same. One of them survives, the other one, being a one-step unit, goes in my dead pile. These are Eastern units, so they can't be rebuilt, so I could just bag them at this point. I got to do the same for units coming in at Area D, and then drop some Volksgrenadiers over at Berlin. Look at where the Russians are going to be coming in and try to figure out a defensive line for them. And at the same time as I'm doing that, as the Allied player over here, the Western Allied player, the Soviet Western German player will be moving his units here. So you kind of have you each get to play, you each get to do your maneuvering and figure out what the hell you want to do at the same time. That's a nice facet to the game, I think. I don't think Battle for Germany actually has that. I think each side moves, like the Western Allies move at the same time that the Eastern Germans move. By doing it this way, you know, you get to both be playing at the same time, which is often a complaint about the I go, you go is, yeah, I'm sitting there with a lot of downtime now. Obviously solo, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference. And although this idea is not really designed to be particularly, I mean, it's designed not to appeal more to the opposed play, but also, even when I'm playing opposed, I like a lot of downtime, especially if I got a pipe and some tea or coffee or something to chill out with. Tempting as it might be to like try to bust up an American unit, forming my defensive line is more important. So I'm forming a line behind the river there, or stream. It's got to be, I don't know. And also fell back here because even though the Brits are kind of hopeless in the battle, I just can't afford to have that, to support way out there. So falling back a little bit just to give myself a little bit of room over here. Pushed over here. Now, I thought this was all mountain. It's not. It's rough. The mountain is just this nasty dark stuff, which means the woods are as good as the rough, and I might as well fall to there. Over here, throwing some defenses into Warsaw and Krakow, and ran over to Budapest, actually, although I don't think we want to be that close. I don't think we want to be in Pest. Some of the thinking here is the Russians kind of can't attack unless they get lucky. So, I mean, they just have overwhelming force from what I can see. But it means that it's kind of just, you know, you're going to get a certain distance here. You'll make some strategic or some tactical, you know, decisions that affect how far you get, but most of it's going to be actually die rolls for, did you get to play this turn? No, as far as I can see. We'll see how it actually plays out, but that's something I'm not really too thrilled about in terms of, you know, how it looks. But at least it does give, you know, the guy who's playing the Western Germans something to do that's a little bit more offensive than, you know, maybe picking off a lone unit here and there. Because mainly, I'm just looking for my terrain and going and finding it. Looking for my terrain and going and finding it. And you can see, when I got double terrain, it's pretty decent. It's just the numbers are such that it's ugly. On the bright side, though, there's a fair amount of reinforcements coming in. And the Rhine should be pretty easy to defend, I would hope. Although I want to defend in front of it. But I got all these fortresses and everything. That's going to be hard to dig them out of because I can ignore retreat. So one of the things with the Bocage was, geez, do I want to take losses or do I want to try to hold this space? And the losses sometimes were just too heavy to accept and you know, take the retreat loss, take the losses instead of a retreat. Was looking kind of appealing, and the Germans are defending against it to some extent, was, hey, what if I take ports that are further back? You know, take something like these ports here that aren't terribly well defended. I could launch an attack there, and hey, maybe something cool would come of it. And then I have more ports. Yeah, it's true, but I have a very limited number of trucks. They're not going to be able to extend me very far forward. I really have to take ports where I'm going to be fighting, and I'm probably not going to be fighting there. Do I want those ports? Well, I don't know. I mean, it may not even be worth dispatching stuff to deal with them particularly. And another similar thought was, hey, what if I do a landing and try to take Bordeaux and then link these up? But again, I don't have a lot of trucks here. If I'm going to be getting these guys out, it probably involves the Normandy landing somehow putting enough pressure or something. I mean, if I expend Western trucks over here, then this southern front is not going to be that big a deal. Now, I can be out of supply and can kind of slip through if there's nothing in my way, but that doesn't look likely. There's enough Germans there to make things kind of ugly, although they may fall back out of there and let me join together and work together. Who knows? I've made my way, you know, out of the Bocage and I'm hitting the river here. I'm finding myself now getting too far from my supply lines. I had to bring a truck in to help with that. But basically I couldn't launch an attack. I broke this hex and could have gotten an advance, which I mean I did, but I couldn't do an overrun here with a big stack of 4 units that I would have liked to do because I was outrunning my supply line. The Germans had only retreated 1 hex, then maybe it would have been allowed. But yeah, I mean, you can see Paris is kind of a little less than safe at this point. How the Germans want to defend this, I mean, obviously, right now I think I'm still justified in saying I'm defending Paris, but it could get kind of risky, and I'm not sure that these guys are really capable of standing there much longer or any longer. So we'll probably pull them out. A bunch more German eastern troops coming in, some of which will be reduced, obviously. And over here, this this was a 1-2 attack, a shift up to 1-1 because I didn't get much air power this time. I managed to do 2 attacks over there at 2 shift and one down here at 1 shift. I still have a couple of ports left. I kind of want one to try to extend. I may like land it somewhere like here, and then that'll extend my supplies a little bit, or maybe even drop it behind the German line, which will put some threat on Le Havre and make it very hard for Le Havre to hold. Of course, there's a lot of Germans. This is only a 1-point class port. It'll only have 3 units in it, assuming it makes it. The one beach means I'll only have 1 unit, and it's quite possible that could fail. 2-point beaches are fairly safe to land on. Trying to do an end run like that might be pretty dangerous. Plus, I'm not going to have the supplies to support from behind, so I kind of think I have to try to drop in over there, maybe even on the 0 here, get a little closer supply line, but I don't think that's necessary. And then, of course, the Brits won't be able to supply. Only one force will be able to be an attack supply, because I'll only have 1 port available, 1 beachhead port. As long as I get it landed before I make my attacks. No, because I have to declare my my attack capability. I'm actually a little worried. The Germans could run up and stomp on my headquarters. Now they come back in the reinforcement phase, so I don't know how big a deal that would be. It's completed their move. Now I've strung out along here, right along the river line. Space is not really in between the units, which kind of feels unnatural, but honestly, with the you can choose whether to attack things, it's a hard call either way, because I can't defend the river line unless I prevent the enemy from crossing, which more or less the way the zones of control work in this, you got to have a unit in every hex. On the other hand, because we can pick 1 unit to attack, 1 stack to, well, 1 hex to attack, you don't get that kind of supporting facet even from every other hex, really. In some places I've clustered, not quite sure why, and the Russians are coming in. The Russians are coming. I don't know what's going on here yet. I moved, I may attack, but I found an attack that I kind of want to make here against those Americans, and it turns out I have a 2-to-1 on them, which is kind of cool. I don't think there's any rivers in the way. I don't make the attack if there's any. Yeah, there's no rivers in the way. It's kind of hard. I mean, it's easy to see, but it's kind of hard to remember when they're the same color. There's like minor rivers and regular rivers, and then there's the Rhine, which also is the Danube, but which is basically an impassable river. So that 2-to-1. It doesn't sound like great odds, and it really isn't, but remember I have the reduction because of the tactical flexibility rules, so I might get away with something better. And I do. I get a D1R1, so I force the Allies to fall back. Now, ground is important in this game, but probably not as important as steps right now. I can pick where I'm going to attack, and then, of course, if I get a success, I can always exploit through it, so that doesn't sound too bad. And you can see the Germans pulled back. They're giving up Brittany if the Allies want it. They've pulled forces out of here, heading up towards Paris. Should be able to defend it. Anyway, for the loss, well, we'll take that retreat, and that allows the Germans to advance. Now, this is not a terribly effective place to be, but you know, I think it's better than here. And I can actually, since I'm out of the zone here, move this guy. Okay, yeah, I can move up with the exploit movement. I could actually move one of these too. Let's get this into place as well. Basically, if the Allies want to start marching south, have at it. I've got some defenses there, but it's not like when I was trying to block them in the bocage. I don't have a tremendous reason to prevent them from busting through this way, and they don't have any real desire to do so. I mean, sure, they, you know, or Brittany, but the Brits can run into Brittany as it stands. Let's see what we got here. Probably shouldn't have that crappy unit. I only have 13 strength points. I'm probably looking at worse than a 1-to-1, so I'm not going to drop an attack there. And that gets us, how far along are we here? End of July. And a bunch of Russians. This is clearly going to be a rough turn. Russians coming in. Allies. I got my air points. I got 5 of them. I'm putting air dominance in both the areas where I'm planning on fighting. And that drops us down to invasion placement. I gotta think about this, because this is the turn. Other things to do too, but this is the turn before the beach ports are removed, which means if I'm gonna kind of break this line, I'm gonna be stuck with just Cherbourg, and I won't have it next turn at all. So I'm really thinking that I want to land another beach. That might be here, where I won't have to roll for it. That'll give me more, you know, more troops into play. Of course, I only have 2 beach ports left. I may need 1 in support down here as well, and that's kind of where the problem is running right now. If I drop this here, it's a little further back than maybe it could be. The alternative is to drop here and maybe try to support attacks against that, but then I have to use emergency attacks next turn, and I have to, yeah, I'm going to have to anyway, but bring trucks and stuff in to get the supplies from Cherbourg, which, you know, obviously kind of slows things down a bit. But on the other hand, I'm finding it tough to force this line. I think we'll be able to manage it, but better be able to manage it. But yeah, it's not trivial. And I also would like to kind of clear out some of the southern stuff with the Brits, if I can. I'm not so sure I can. So coming from here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I can get supplies down there pretty easily. All right. On the side of things, I have 1 attack-capable headquarters. Let's ignore them for a little while. That's going to be a whole bunch of attacks all at once, and I just want to finish the Western Allies' turn. Here, an ineffectual attack. I think I kind of screwed up, so I threw an extra U.S. unit in this turn. I think I only sent 1 unit in at most last turn, maybe completely forgot. But we're kind of ramming our heads against the wall there. Over here, the Brits blew this unit away. I'm keeping this unit here so that I can do an exploitation move and an overrun against this remaining unit, which is a high defense unit, and I won't have any air support for it, but that's okay. It's actually, I was thinking about dropping some paratroopers into here to aid this big attack. I chose not to do it. I ended up getting a good result, D2, R2. But the Germans chose, with 3 units there, to stick around and keep 1 good unit in place. That line's important to them as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to give up Le Havre. I want to slow down the Allied advance there. I got to remember this is a first turn drop and a 1. That's going to be 2 additional units there. So I'm going to see a fair flow of additional forces pushing in on the board. I'll do the overrun, and then we'll go play with the Ruskies. Combat chart is so variable. I love that about it. But here I am on the 5-to-1 chart, and I get an A2D1. So I don't even get the hex. Not that the hex is terribly important, but I was, counting on being able to knock out a decent German unit. And yeah, sure, it'll come back, but cause some casualties. Instead, I caused some British and Polish casualties. All right, let me do the cleanup over here in terms of getting the additional landings and everything into place. So, with the Germans pressed so close, the Russian headquarters kind of has to trace through a lot of zones of control. So I'm not going to be able to get too many attacks off that one headquarters that's going to be hitting here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to here. I could conceivably use that. Let's throw an extra unit in there just to push that out. And let's swap that out. Keep that guard cav loose. Up here, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 really to there. So I'm going to get an attack on this hex. I guess an attack on this hex. And that's it. All the forces up here are just not going to be able to do anything. Now, once I get some map room, I'll be able to have the headquarters commanding the whole front, basically. But as it stands, it's really tough. The Germans just set up on the river line, So this attack ended up a 1-to-1. And no way you would get that with... it ended up by 1 point, basically. Actually a fraction, a half point off. No, I don't think so. Let me make sure, because if that's the case, it's the standard rounding rule takes me up there. 23 and 18 is 41. That actually gives me 21, yeah, to 11. 21 to 11. Yeah, so it ends up a 1-to-1 attack. Because I don't, right? No. The standard rounding rule gives me to 2-to-1. God, I hate the standard rounding rule here. I've probably misplayed that several times, making attacks a little off. Like, I'm just so used to how odds are normally handled, and it's so difficult to round by the standard rounding rule. So yeah, that actually gets me a 2-to-1. And remember, the results are doubled here. Which is big because I just got a D4, I guess just one retreat there. But that's a lot of hammering to those units. For an example, and I'm pretty sure I've been ignoring it completely. I have 13 in defense here, right? 8 and 5, and 34 to 13. Now normally that's what? A 2-to-1, right? But now I think it's 3-to-1. But in order to make sure, I actually have to use a calculator. I can't just use my normal thought process, or I have to think a little harder about it. And I don't want to do that, so I'll just say it's 3-to-1. Yeah, what the hell? Yeah, you put finicky little crap in there, and I have trouble with it. And honestly, I think OCS uses it too, and I think I screw it up there as well. It's so natural to have the odds be the break-offs. And the only reason that this is in place, but you can't just fudge it away, realistically. So anyway, I got a D4R2, which is going to blast that unit out of there, as well as the other one. The only reason this is in place is to add to Dean's idea of, you shouldn't be able to calculate the odds easily. Well, they don't look as good enough, but the problem is the chart is designed for that half point. It's a breaking point somewhere. You got to put a line somewhere, right? Any odds chart has to. But instead of, this being a 3-to-1 odds, what it really is a 3.5-to-1 odds, a 2.5-to-1 odds. That's really what it comes down. I'm sorry, no, 1.5 and 2.5, 3.5, etc. Now, I hate 3-to-2, right? I really don't like where I can't do it with whole numbers because it's so much easier to do the calculations with whole numbers. And what that means is then I'm kind of forced to either do a calculator, to pull out a calculator, or to think a little harder to get that numerical result. And I can't just drop to the normal odds rules, which is what I've been doing, unfortunately, because the chart is not designed with that in mind. If it had been designed with that in mind, the breaking points would be slightly different. Is there another possible value? Yeah, you know. All right, so the difference between, and this is why the 3-to-2 odds show up on a lot of tables, the difference between 1.5 times the size of a force or 1.9 times the size of the force and 1-to-1 odds is fairly significant. And I don't mind expressing that difference. The 3-to-2 odds, 4-to-5s, those tend to do that pretty well. A lot of games take those up because of that. And that's probably the only place where it's really important, is when you're in those lower odds. Because when you get out here, yeah, you know, whether it's 4.5 or 5-to-1, 2.5 or 3-to-1, you know, you're splitting hairs. The system's probably not all that well fine-tuned. But when you're hitting around the 1-to-1, you really have to be careful, because the game is obviously designed around that. Anyway, what did we have? D4, R2. And we get a little exploit out through here. That's the advance after combat, because I got an R2. I can push 2 hexes instead of just 1. Wouldn't want to go any further anyway. The headquarters loses its attack capability because it performed an attack. This one, of course, is fine. We're all done over there. It looks like supply is okay. I hope. I don't know, because I got a trace, but I believe this kind of supply is traced from the unit. Might have some out of supply units there. This will be under Russian supply. Yeah, I'll take care of it and come back. I mean, but the thing is, if I have to trace the supply through actual hexes on the board, and we'll count half hexes here, this headquarters can get me 1, 2, 3, 4, but not to there. This one can get me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no further than that. Well, I could get there anyway. I can get, you know, so there'll be a lot of units that are out of supply if it's from the headquarters to the unit. If it's from the unit to the headquarters. Now, I know it's from the headquarters to the unit for combat supply. I'm not so sure for trace. Not a big deal. I can trace to the edge of the map. I believe. Shit. I hate looking shit up. And that's the problem with using the video. I would just say screw it if I was playing without the video. And this adds to my Soviet units if they are within supply range of a headquarters, if it's able to trace a path of any distance. Okay. So I'm not sure that American unit that was out of supply before was. Maybe the rules are different for it. Every country has its own supply rules in this game. Well, every power. And they're not easy to find. They have supply functions. Just the distance which it can reach forward and backwards to a supply source, yeah. Allied supply. Within supply range of a friendly headquarters, on or adjacent to a friendly supply source, or within 5 movement points of a truck that can, yeah. So the Western Allies have to be within the trace supply of their units. The Russians, they have to be in the range to get trace supply. The Russians have to just be able to trace back. But for attack, they have to be within range. The Germans just have to be able to trace back for anything until they do this, at which point they can trace 10 hexes to the German border, I think. But here's the problem. The expansion changes that. Well, not the trace, I don't think. Not the I think it's still 10 hexes to the German border, but you have to be able to trace all the way back to the divide line as well. And over here, it's always just all the way back to the divide line. It's kind of like, oh God, you know. I understand that they're trying to provide something that gives a lot more, you know, that really expresses more than just the supply situation. It allows you to abstract more of the supply so the Germans don't have to be, you know, running supply lines a la an OCS game and at all, basically, so that the Russians have a much easier time. But you load me up with too many different roles, and yeah, things get hard. You know, the thing, I'm still going back to the standard rounding and the odds and everything. SCS is supposed to be easy. I don't mind with OCS too much, although I'm sure I still forget it completely there. I don't mind with it too much because that's a pretty detailed game. There's a lot that you're dealing with there. But with this system, it just feels like there's too much burden. And honestly, this adds a lot to it. But then so do the way that there's different supply rules for each country and all kind of shit like that. All right. Well, that's halfway through this turn. I hope they're not all this long, but I fear they will be. You know, I mean, the original game was fairly small. You can see it's kind of contained. There aren't all that many pieces over there, one map or etc. This adds significantly to it. Even if the Russians can't attack all the time. There's a lot more pieces. There's a lot more to think about. It's kind of like a broad open thing. I'm not sure how much it adds, especially in solo. I can see, again, in the opposed play where someone says, I don't want to just be defending. Kind of have to be careful about. I don't see any cases of this where they're, yeah, here's one. So turn 20, for example. The only things that happen in the West for the Germans is transferring units to the east, and there's no indication of that over on the turn record track. And certainly, you know, my piles of counters don't reflect that. So you kind of have to look up the turns reinforcements for everybody every turn, because you don't know when that's going to happen. For the Soviets, there's another set, for example, on turn 10, they get 2 replacements. And again, that's not, you're not going to be looking in here because you don't have the counters set up or whatever. So you kind of need to look up what's going on every turn, or maybe mark some stuff up on the map or something. Anyway, I got my new Germans coming in, and we'll see what they can do. This looks scary as hell. And you know, I lost a fair number of units due to rolling 6s or whatever. And very much the East is very random. And I've said that before, you know, hey, can the Russians attack? If they never get to attack, they'll never get to advance, right? Basically. Whereas over here, I mean, sure, you could fail on your attacks or anything all the time. Luck's in play, but it doesn't so much feel like, oh, I am just doomed. So if you take the view that some gamers take, and this highly variable combat chart will be ugly for that. Much uglier than like buckets of dice are, for example. That, geez, I always assume kind of the worst luck. This is a very bad game for you. You will not be able to make the attacks, you know, if you're paralyzed and handcuffed by that kind of thing. But, you know, I mean, luck should play out over time and come out somewhat even, right? You should have some chance, so just skew it a little in your favor and you should be okay, I think. About them transfers brings up something else that you have to keep in mind with this game. When playing with the Eastern map, maybe with either, but you're forced to transfer units. If you don't have the right units, you have to give up generally much better stuff. But if you have the right units and they're damaged, that's fine, and they go over there in damaged state. And that helps you kind of on two levels. One, you're giving up the least you possibly can in the front that you care about, and two, you're sending weaker forces to, you know, your enemy on the, essentially to your enemy in terms of scoring and in terms of the game on the front that you kind of don't want to do, to hold off. You don't want the Germans to win on. Anyway, what that means is you may not want to build units up to full strength. Now, it's really hard not to build that yummy unit up and to take, say, a half strength unit instead, especially when I know the transfers aren't in place. Of course, the half strength unit gains a lot less. Building the half strength unit is more valuable anyway, so I think I'll end up doing that. And let's see, we're done with 10th of August 44. The Germans still holding their line, kind of putting more and more strength in front of the Seine there. Over here, we got a successful attack on this, and you know, it's looking really iffy for the Allies to be able to hold things. Of course, Marseille is actually pretty easy to capture, so I may just drop a force in there, and then, you know, using my one remaining invasion. It's tough, but I think I can kind of just pocket this whole area and destroy it because the Germans are being so aggressive down there. Of course, that gets rid of any more chances of end runs up here. I really would like to use one, but this might, you know, breaking this open kind of opens up my route to Paris. There's not anything really in the way if I can cancel those guys out. Over here in the east, those damaged forces falling back, and also here falling back a little bit, not in as good a defensive terrain, but I just can't hold the line on the river, and coming out of these, it was too tough, so any kind of, you know, semblance of a defensive line more or less requires that, you know, I end up not behind good terrain. I can hope that the Russians don't get any attacks next turn, and in that case, maybe I'll be able to set up a line, you know, along here or something. Although I like the idea of Krakow's worth 2 victory points. I'm going to lose Krakow no matter what. Question is, is a speed bump there worthwhile? You know. Show you what's going on. First of all, the Russians didn't get any headquarters activations, so they're just pushing forward with their forces. Remember, you don't have to attack. I'm going to make a landing at Marseille. It's my last port, but that's okay. I'm going to try to force the line here. I only have one headquarters that can attack from. I may end up trying to push there too. I believe I'm going to. But in order to force the line, I'm going to drop 2 paratroopers. This time I'm going to remember to make my rolls. Now, on 1s or 2s, because I'm dropping the zone of control, they take a casualty. But they're fine. And I don't have to do this necessarily in order. We're all on this hex. Yeah, that's the big one. Over here, oh, I haven't thought about this yet. Let me think if I'm gonna launch that attack. I was planning on it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to. So we're gonna have the air point there too, but I gotta move into place. Okay, here is the roll I needed. Enemy zones of control block supply trays. Yeah, but friendly units negate this, including the +2 movement point cost. Now that's supply trace. Has that got something to do with trace supply? I don't think so. I think it's all supply, which means actually Allied supply is much, much easier than I've been implying. And in fact, that would have affected the Russians quite heavily too. They would have attacked all along the front. Oops. Yeah. Anyway. We got the landing here. Some more troops coming on. I did the attack here, it was kind of a wash, but the Germans are going to have to withdraw because of the landing. And we also got a breakthrough here, 5-1 was our final roll. We'll be able to pump some armor through. And that's what I was really looking at was, wow, the breakthrough rolls are totally useless because I'll break through and I'll be out of supply. That's not quite the case. I'll be able to throw a stack of units down, I guess over here, which forces the Germans, again, to abandon the line. And now comes the big question. Put these guys all out where they could do exploitation movement. But can I do exploitation combat from here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So only if I do it from this hex. I won't be able to slip around the back there or anything. Which kind of sucks. And since none of my headquarters, you know, I should have moved it up a hex or something, but I didn't. That would have, I don't know if that would have helped much. I mean, I could have maybe undermined something else. But I think what I want to do is kind of make things as painful as possible in the north. And I could have done this anyhow and maintained my supply line by pulling that armor back. And I think that's about as good as I can do. I've got some stuff coming into the ports. Cherbourg's going to get something, and the beach port there. Those guys I already have covered. All right, so the Germans are trying to form themselves a line, kind of coming out of Paris, but not really along the Seine. How wise is that? That doesn't sound bright. The problem is the guys coming to Dieppe have to be there. But these guys I didn't need to pull out quite so far. So how about instead get myself into that. Allies could still slam into there. I wasn't able to get that hex. Let me rearrange some of those units so that I've got the whole of the Seine covered. The other thing is, over here, those German units are free now. There's no more invasions. And theoretically, the Germans wouldn't know that the Allies are out of, you know, whatever shipping capability. Getting out of here, that looks like it's going to be rough. I don't know if it's going to succeed. And some backup units coming up to help, but we shall see. If Allied movement is sufficient, these French are no longer attacking. If Allied movement is sufficient, they can kind of cut it off, and they can do like, if they do it cleverly, they can do strategic movement to do it. Over here, I tried to make something. I don't know. The game originally, they were playing around with the idea of a Warsaw Rising type situation, and they got rid of that. It just ends up too complicated. So, you know, the Germans will abandon eventually. But yeah, I got to fix things here. And then there was something else I wanted to say. Oh, next turn, this isn't it, but next turn I can abandon Paris. So I don't have to make this line hold for any real amount of time. But also next turn Marseille comes into online, which means, okay, that's kind of awesome, you know. If the Germans could have somehow cut that situation long enough, maybe they could have caused problems, but with a headquarters showing up down here, it means I'm going to be attacked from both sides. Oh, I know what it was I wanted to say. There was a German stack here, which is subject to the 180 rule, which means if supply happened at the beginning of the turn, it would have been out of supply and had a hard time getting out of there. As it was, he was able to kind of bail fairly easily. Let's see what I can do about that hex. So, well, you can see even with some screw-ups, especially with the supply rolls, the Allies seem to be well ahead of track. I mean, the blockage basically lasted throughout August, and I think we finished up here. Cherbourg fell almost right away, in the game. Now, maybe I'm not being clever with my use of the Germans, but it was something I wanted to check because I figured, you know, I've botched my attack so much that, you know, maybe I got close to historical results, because a lot of people have been saying, or have said online, it's a little too easy to make that initial breakout. Well, it kind of feels it. I mean, you know, I'm not a World War II guy. I know about as much about World War II as I know about anything, which is pretty limited. So, you know, I have to look these things up and try to think about them. And, you know, I'm also screwing up rules and not the best user of the rules, even if I understand them. But I'm usually okay on defense, and it's kind of surprising to see the game not reflect some of the difficulties. The Germans definitely gave up, but they also, I think they also fought a little too far back. I was too worried about my lines rather than pushing in deeper. I mean, we'll see what the overall effect is. Maybe the Germans would lose more units and it's harder for them to get them back. Anyway, you know, it's fun just pushing pieces around and seeing what they do, right? It's kind of what I do. Let's load this one up. We're on the, I guess, 20th of August.